Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Commander Clash podcast, where the Commander Clash crew, Richard, Seth, Krim, and I, Tomer, we discuss Commander-related topics. And today, we are going to be talking all about equipment. We're going to be talking all about the equipment type in Magic the Gathering, specifically in Commander, and we're going to be rating them in our handy-dandy tier list. And as usual, our tier list ranking that we always use for these videos that we try to be consistent about, we have from D to S. So for D, it's don't play. These are cards we're actively looking to cut from our decks, and if we do see it in our decks, we hope to discard it or mill it. At C, these cards are kind of average. They're mediocre filler cards. Sometimes they're going to be showing up in our decks perhaps for certain restrictions. Like let's say we have a deck building restriction that's a budget restriction. Then we might fill these decks with these type of cards. Finally, at B, we have cards that are very good, but they're only good in certain decks or certain archetypes. So for example, if a card is really, really good in Spellslinger archetypes, but not in other archetypes or the vast majority of archetypes in Commander, then we'd rate it as a B instead of something much higher. Then at A, we have cards that are really good in a large portion of decks. So cards that fit in multiple archetypes and are very good in multiple archetypes, or just fit in a lot of very different commanders. However, they're not an auto-include in every single deck. It's not a card that we immediately slam dunk into every single deck that this card can actually fit in. But then finally at S, we have the auto-includes. These are staples, format staples, that we're going to be running in basically every single deck that can run them. And we basically have to be convinced for a reason why not to run these cards in a deck that can actually run them. So that's our rating scale. Hopefully we stay consistent with it, and we'll see what the results are. So we went through basically all the most popular, most commonly played equipment cards, and also a bunch of cards that we like, maybe pet cards, underrepresented equipments. And we're going to be discussing our favorite ones, the most noteworthy ones that we have a lot to talk about. And based on our grading scale, as you can see, like S is a very high coveted title. Like an equipment that shows up in every single deck is a very high bar, specifically for such a narrow card type. So we don't actually have a lot of S's. We only have 3 cards that any of us picked as an S, and only 2 of those cards multiple people rate even highly. So we're going to be talking about those 2, the best of the best equipment, according to us, that we play the most. And that's going to be Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots. These are 2 colorless equipments. Both of them cost 2 mana to cast. Lightning Greaves gives the equipped creature Shroud and has an equip cost of 0. And Swiftfoot Boots gives the creature Hexproof, and it costs 1 to equip. And both of them give the creature also Haste. So Shroud and Haste for Lightning Greaves and equip 0. Swiftfoot Boots, Hexproof and Haste and equip 1. And our ratings for them: Lightning Greaves, Richard gave it an S. Me and Seth gave it, Seth and Krim gave it an A. I gave it an S. And Swiftfoot Boots, only Richard gave it an S, and then the rest of us gave them A's. So we're going to talk about that first. Richard, why do you rate both of these so highly?
I don't know. Pure pressure.
Wow, what a great opening.
When I think of equipment, I automatically think of these 2. It's by far the most played equipment, and people like auto-include them in their decks. They come in pre-cons and whatnot, and I'm not sure they deserve this S status. Like I'm thinking about it. I'm like, should they be Bs? Are people overplaying this card? Which is why I want to discuss with you guys. Like, what are we doing with this? And I find myself cutting these cards more and more. And I play all kinds of equipment, right? And I probably play more like swords than boots. So is this like S mentality, like a holdover from 5 years ago? Like, what are we even doing? Like, we're just getting our creatures wrath. They provide little protection. People can remove your Greaves and remove your creature. So maybe you only play it when you need the haste. Maybe you only play it I don't know.
I
But I'm leaning towards it shouldn't be as highly played as it is.
I agree they're overrated. I think they are the best equipment in Commander, but I also think that they're too heavily played. I personally, I don't think any equipment can be an S. I think because you have to have so many creatures in your deck, I think just by definition, if you don't have any creatures, you wouldn't play an equipment, so that means that you couldn't really truly have an S. These cards are really, really good. I have found myself cutting them more and more, though. I play them in decks where I really care about protecting my commander, or where I really care about haste, but I think a lot of people, this is just the first card they add to their deck. Every time you build a commander deck, you just throw in Greaves, you throw in Boots, you throw in both, and I think that's incorrect. I don't think they are that good anymore. We have so many options, we have so many different equipment even now, compared to 5 years ago, that I don't think they should be considered auto-includes for every deck.
I fully agree with that. I mean, I haven't. This is a card that's definitely not auto included. I see a lot of people also jamming it immediately. I only play it in things where decks where I really rely on my commander. So if I had a card like if I was playing Gen or something like that, then sure. Otherwise, I pretty much don't have it in my deck. I play it in my whatever the new vampire, the Rakdos vampire, because you do want to keep him around, right? But yeah, if your deck revolves around your commander heavily, then sure maybe. But otherwise, I don't play this.
I am a little bit surprised because we rated it so highly, and then immediately when we start talking about it, we're like, actually, is it overrated? So this is an interesting turn of events.
It's good, it's a sweet card, but I don't know if it's you're including it every card, every deck. I mean, this isn't the first card I add to a deck.
I mean, if you look at EDH Rec and just look at the play numbers, this is magnitude. These two cards are magnitudes ahead of the other equipment. Greaves is 28%, Swift Boots is 26%. And then when you get to the first sword, it's 3%. And other really popular equipment are 2-3%. So I don't think that Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots, even though they should be at the top of the list of most played, I don't think they should be 10 times more heavily played than the best sword or whatever. To me, that's just a little insane.
Let me interject real quick because we've got a lot of comments on this. So the way EDH Rec works is it's all time. So older cards will just naturally have a higher percentage, because if you built a deck 3 years ago that was indexed by EDH Rec, it cannot have any new cards in it. So the new cards are always underrepresented, and the old cards are overrepresented. So just a little asterisk when we look at EDH Rec numbers.
Although I will say, if you go to an EDH Rec page, they actually have a few filtering options. I was actually looking at the past week, so that would theoretically only include decks that people had submitted within the last 7 days. So if you do a little bit of filtering, you can kind of get around that problem a little bit.
I think also something that EDH Rec, I've run into the past, some inflated numbers, is if some of the cards show up in precons, a lot of the decks that show up that are picked up from EDH Rec are just people who copy paste the precons online somewhere to see.
And there's certainly price concerns too, where Swiftfoot Boots is a $2 card, and a sword is $40 or whatever. So that would also play into it.
There's reasons outside of power level disparity between how many people play Sol Ring versus how many people play Mana Crypt. Despite most people know the Mana Crypt's a really good card and equal to Sol Ring, or but the price between Mana Crypt. What
is Mana Crypt good?
I'm gonna leave that in. I was hoping nobody noticed.
Do you still hold by your S? Do you still hold by your S on Lightning Greaves?
I can be brought down, but I do value highly both the things that Lightning Greaves in particular does. I put it as an S initially, and I do think it is the best equipment overall in the format. Because in decks that I think a lot of creatures benefit so much from haste. Haste is one of the most powerful keywords in Commander, just because you get your immediate value out of the creature, be it an activated ability or the fact that it can immediately attack and combat triggers or just deal damage and stuff like that. I think haste is the most powerful creature keyword to have overall, just of the evergreen ones. And also being able to give something either Shroud or Hexproof is also really good, especially if there's a really important creature that you want to stick around. And the fact that it equips for just 0, you can put this like turn 2 Lightning Greaves, and then you can play your commander the turn after that, and you could just like tap out to do so, and you can immediately put on your Lightning Greaves onto it and go wild. I really value how efficient it is and the 2 keywords that it brings with. So I will run it in decks with lots of good creatures in the 99 that benefit from that haste, but I will also just run it in a deck that like, even if it doesn't have any other creatures except for my commander, if my commander has like a really powerful ability that I want to activate like immediately and I don't want it to be targeted, like Drownu, for example, or like Garth, Garth One Eye, those type of things, you don't really need other creatures in there. So I think it's still the best. Is it an S? Probably not. There's a lot of situations where like there's other equipments that I might want over it, so maybe like Lightning Greaves A and Swiftfoot Boots B.
I would say Swiftfoot Boots is higher ranked than Lightning Greaves for me.
I was gonna say that too. I think that like the difference between Hexproof and Shroud in a lot of decks, especially if you're a Voltron deck or an equipment deck where you want to be able to load up your thing with other equipment or auras, actually does kind of come into play to the point where I'd be willing to pay 1 extra mana to equip it if I can, get around the Shroud drawback.
I would say the 1 mana savings will be more relevant than the number of times you need to target your own creature. So yes, in Voltron, you're kind of hosed, but like in all other games, like that 1 mana probably means a lot because you can play your commander on curve and then slap the Greaves on it. So I actually think, yes, there's a drawback and you need to think about it, but most of the time Greaves will be better.
Yeah, the equip cost is what like is such a gulf in difference in terms of my play experience that Greaves is so much better. But like, yeah, if you want to target your creature with like equipment, auras, spells, whatever, then Lightning Greaves is just not good, right? Like Shroud is a deal breaker. But otherwise, the boots.
You're forgetting combat tricks. Like, what if I want to bounce my commander back?
Giant growth. Like, what if you want to try giant growth? Your commander.
Maybe not giant growth, but I feel like the hexproof has just always been something I cared a lot more about than Shroud.
Okay,
you
so
can
after
remove hexproof, by the way, you can't. Shroud.
That's true. That's true.
You can't remove Shroud.
Yeah, Shadowsphere doesn't get around this. Oof. Okay, so after this quick discussion, we initially went for Lightning Greaves. Me and Richard, we picked S. Seth and Crib picked A. Would we change our rating after this quick discussion? Do we think it's a little bit? Should it go a little bit lower in comparison to now?
I don't think so. I mean, I will stand behind the A. I still think they are good in a large percentage of decks. I think I don't think they're as good as maybe some people think, but I do think they deserve to be the most played equipment in the format, and they are good in a lot of decks.
Yeah, like they're easily the best equipment. They're cheap. Everything like they're cheap. Their equip cost is cheap, so it's everything you want.
I'm still on the fence, but I still hold my S. I think if you take like just 80% of decks or something and just throw a Greaves in, it got better. So no matter what you're doing, if you're playing Spellslinger, it got better. If you're playing creatures, it got better, right? So I still think it's S, although that percentage is dropping day by day, and maybe in a year or two we'll have a different conversation. But I think for now, if you needed to buy Secret Lair boots or something, like I think you can buy it and throw in any
the
deck.
dog ones,
be, like safe. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how many of my decks, or how many decks out there rather, or archetypes out there really care about targeting your own creatures with stuff. Like obviously if you're an aura deck, you're a Voltron deck, you're an equipment deck, you don't want abilities. Yeah.
You like there are often like things that I want for my own planeswalker to target my own creature.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's a big enough amount of archetypes or decks represented in the format for it to be less than an S to me. It's either an S or an A. I'm not gonna fight either way on those. I think. What about Swiftfoot Boots though? Richard, you gave it an S, and then Seth, Krim, and I gave it an A. Do we still hold on that?
Oh yeah,
same. Yeah, I'm still good in a large percentage of decks, I would say.
Okay. All right. So ratings. We gave the ratings. We poo-pooed the cards a little bit. But at the end of the day, we still came to consensus that these are still overall the best equipments based on our criteria of like, the cards we would put in the most decks. All right, cool. So we got our top equipment out of the way. Now we're going to jump into the nitty gritty where there's going to be a lot of debate. And we're gonna kick things off with the infamous swords, possibly the most popular, iconic equipments ever printed in Magic the Gathering. I think we have to kind of go over them one at a time, but the idea is that each one of these swords, they cost 3 mana. They're artifacts that cost 3 mana, colorless, or generic rather, and they all have pay 2 to equip. And they give protection from 2 colors. Each one gives protection from 2 different colors. And then they all have a combat trigger. When you deal combat damage to a player, you get some cool utility ability. So I think we start with Sword of Hearth and Home. This is protection from white and green. And whenever you deal combat damage to a player, you ramp out 1 basic land. And you get to blink a creature that you own, not necessarily control, but own. And I see that all but Krim gave it A's. Krim, you gave it a B. I have a question for you, Richard, because I could have sworn that like when Sword of Hearth and Home came out, you were very like low on it. Like I remember rating it highly, and you were like, "No, this is bad."
I poo-pooed it.
What changed your mind?
So I poo-pooed it because it was a more expensive Sword of the Animist, and I felt Sword of the Animist was overrated at the time. By now, I am convinced that the most powerful thing you can do in Magic is ramp. So the most powerful cards are Sword of the Animist and Sword of Hearth and Home. The ramp is more important than card draw. So I highly rate this because the way I think about the game is slightly different from when we rated it to begin with. So ramping is the number 1 thing you can do.
I hate it.
Yeah.
You hate it. Well, it's from the protection from a color that
Hate
you
it.
hate, Krim.
The
That's
protection of
from
the sword
grade.
doesn't even matter. I don't even know what
It
the
is,
colors
yeah.
of
That's
Hearth
the
and Home
only
is.
reason why I even have it at a B.
What
The
is
protection
Hearth and
colors
Home
are bad. Those got to be like the worst protection colors too, green and white.
I mean, white swords
Path
protection,
swords?
right?
Everybody plays
Path,
that. There's
Path Exile,
Green
Swords
lets you
to
get through
Plowshares?
creatures.
Yeah, but you're
Yeah.
still getting wrath. You're still getting wrath against the white deck, so it's not like it's really saving your creature. And green doesn't have that much removal. I mean, compared to like black or red or something, I feel like it's weaker removal
I'm
colors.
gonna be real with you, Seth. I mean, I think this sword is. I'm not that much higher on it than when it came out.
Oh, wow.
It's from a C to like a B minus, like trending towards a C plus.
It's gone up.
Yeah, like it's trending downwards, right? Like I don't know. I mean, I think the ability to ramp is obviously good, and that's probably the best thing on the sword. In all seriousness, it is that, and like other than that, though, I really don't care about this sword. The card itself is I think the blinking is okay. It's good in certain decks, right? Like if I want to play it in like a Brago deck or something, sure. Like some kind of flicker deck, sure, that makes sense. Otherwise, I'm probably not really playing this all that much. And then on top of that, the decks that I would want to play this in that would want a ton of mana, well, I just don't play those decks. So like simple as that. Like I mean, I just don't see this card as an A. It just doesn't do any of the things I like, so it's biased. But like I think as a card, the best thing on this is the ramp. So.
I mean, it's just better sort of the Animist, really. Like, it's sort of the
Yeah.
Animist that pumps more, and the only downside is it's 1 more mana to the cast. The equip cost is even the same, and you get 2 protection from 2 different colors, even if I'm not super high on protecting against those colors in specific. So I think it's just better sort of the Animist. The blink mode is, that is the, like, specific deck thing, where if you're in the right deck, it can be really powerful, but any commander deck is going to take advantage of having extra lands on the battlefield. Like, that is what literally every single deck in the format wants to do, and that makes it a pretty clean A for me.
Unless you're 3. See, the thing here is, like, in 3 color decks, I don't even know if I run enough basics. I mean, I do, but, like, I don't know. I just feel like this eventually has a ceiling.
It's crazy. Yeah, but mine.
We need to do a podcast on why people are running too few basics. Like, my
I mean, I
goodness.
run like 6 to 7 basics overall.
That's enough for this.
I mean,
It's a real thing to run out of ramp. If you're
Yeah.
actually gung-ho about ramping, like you'll run through 6 basics quite easily.
Yeah,
I mean, I
but
think you should
if
add a
this is
couple
the
more,
only
probably.
thing that's ramping you. Like, if you have this plus you're like in a green deck and you're just cultivating and you have like seven 7 basics, and yeah, you're in for a bad time. But like, let's say you're a non-green deck, will you really run out of like basics in your deck?
I mean,
let's say I'm playing my rogues deck. I don't. What am I gonna do? Blink my one of my rogues to like get Thieves Guild Enforcer to activate? That's about it, really. And
but if you actually got in 6 hits with the sword and got every basic, aren't you winning anyway? Pretty much. Like if things went that well for you, like it seems like it did its job.
But wouldn't it just be better?
You play a 3-color deck, you're playing like 4 basics, and you like cultivate it, right? Like, I think that's the
or Kodama's
like,
Reach
in mono green, and you run out of basics, right?
On top of that, if I were able to like connect 6 times with any of the other swords, well, okay, not all the other swords, most of the other swords, that one will actually win. Either A, like Fire and Ice, I will draw enough cards to where you're not going to be able to do anything. Feast and Famine is, but so Fire and Ice, Light and Shadow, and then believe it or not, Body and Mind. I love Body and Mind.
Ooh,
wait. No.
I
love Body and Mind?
I love Body and Mind.
Body and Mind is the one sword that you actually don't want to hit your opponent with because it's filling their graveyard and benefiting them. It's the one sword that has like a negative combat trigger on it.
We have to explain what Body and Mind is first, though. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. All right, let's go to Body and Mind. Chris, tell us what Body and Mind does.
Well, of course, because I know it by heart. So it's 3 mana. You get +2/+2 protection from blue and green. And then on top of that, whenever you connect, you get to mill 10 cards and then create a 2/2 green wolf token. So now, outside of like maybe like I know that almost every deck has some form of graveyard like recursion, right? Which is fine, but also every deck should be playing something to combat that. And like in a majority of the decks, I guess the decks that I play, they're all tempo decks, and I love the feeling of just throwing away my like all my like table and pods like favorite cards, and they don't get to play them. So like now if they are, and then like usually it's backed up by counter spells or a ton of graveyard hate. So maybe that's why I love Body and Mind, because I play rogues, I play spirits, I do all that stuff. So it's usually more beneficial for me, and especially in my rogue deck, it's like my favorite sword. And milling, I love milling. Milling is fun. Even if I'm up against the Golgari commander,
deck is good. Maybe even that is questionable.
What's our rating for these? What would you give it? What would you give it, Grim?
Okay, so if I were to give Body and Mind, I'd give that an A. I'd give Light and Shadow an A. I'd give
just Body and Mind. Just Body and Mind. We're going one at a time.
Hey, the card's great. The card's great.
A.
There should be a rating lower than D for that card. Like all the other swords are at least they have some merit to them. This one is like not only the worst sword, but it's like the worst by an incredible. Like sure, if you're playing
good in rogues,
if you're playing a dedicated mill deck. Then okay, then I will give you that. Like if your goal is to empty all of your opponent's library, then it's good. But unless that's your plan, milling 10 cards for your opponent is a huge drawback in my opinion. You're just turning on Eternal Witnesses. You're filling their graveyard with reanimation targets. Like I don't want to mill you for 10 cards. I'm helping you. That's like drawing you a card. It's like a reverse sort of Fire and Ice that is drawing your opponent the card rather than drawing you a card.
I mill your Eternal Witness.
Oh, but what about my Timeless Witness?
It's a
yeah. This is a D.
I love the gambling
your opponents
side
9
of
times
it.
out of 10.
I promise you this much: if I mill you and you're 10 cards, and you watch your favorite cards and your win conditions go to the graveyard, the psychological damage there is more than enough to make it worth enough.
That's like the reverse. Like you don't play cards that mill yourself because you might mill your bomb, right? But you may have never drawn those cards, right? But
sure.
The fact is, you could enable all kinds of flashback synergies, dredge synergies, and it's
but that's tomorrow's problem. Mill.
It has to be rogues because other mill decks don't have attacking creatures. It has to be specifically rogues. So it is like super narrow, right?
Rogues,
it's very good in a rogue
steal
deck, but
your
there's
stuff
no way
deck?
this is actively harming your game plan. This is the only sword I can see that's actively harming your game plan.
I would just equip the sword for a blocker. You get like pro green blue and that's it. You attack. You just like chill. And you block.
I do value mill a lot higher. So like, and I mean, like I will play it in non-rogue decks just because I love the sword. It's so sweet.
All right.
Well,
and then
yourself.
and then
I don't think you convinced the table, but
I fully don't expect to convince the table. I just love mill, so I'm here for it.
All right, we got 5 more swords to cover then. Sword of Feast and Famine. I think well, this might be the one that we've actually reached a consensus on. A's all around. This one is protection from black and green. So target creature goes +2/+2. Protection from black and green. And when it deals combat damage to a player, you get to untap all of your lands. And the target that got hit has to discard a card. The untapping of lands is kind of busted. It essentially doubles, for most decks, it doubles their effective mana output in a turn. You can, on your first main phase, you spend your mana doing whatever, casting your spells. Then you go into combat, you get that combat trigger, you untap all of your lands. Post-combat main phase, now you can cast basically double the amount of stuff. But it gets worse if you don't have a lot of lands in play, obviously. But if you even if you're untapping like 3 lands, like +3 lands every single turn is kind of busted. And it makes your opponent discard, which, is like a little cherry on top. Oof. But also it can
But
combo.
that's
Like,
that's actively hurting your game plan. What if they discard a card in their graveyard they want back?
There's a difference between milling and
I don't
removing cards from
know.
somebody's hand. A big difference, I feel.
And plus the mode you're playing it for is the untap all your land mode. And there is a big difference, but there's a reason Seedborn Muse is really popular. Just untapping all of your mana, having twice as much mana is a really, really powerful effect, and this gives it to you every single turn, which is just super strong. In basically any deck that can consistently trigger it.
It's also the only sword that combos into a win condition. You pair it with Aggravated Assault, which is, I think, pay 5 mana to take an extra combat step. So if you have Feast and Famine and Aggravated Assault, and you have 5 lands on the battlefield, or lands that can tap for 5 mana, you just attack. You untap all your lands. You activate Aggravated Assault. You get an extra combat step. You attack again. You just do it over and over again. And you just win the game.
This sword is good. We don't need to talk about it. I think it's pretty straightforward why it's good. We have a million more cards to get through. What I want to ask you guys about is, why do you like Light and Shadow? An equally useless sword, in my opinion.
Okay.
It's pro black-white, game 3.
Amazing colors to have pro from.
CMC 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand.
It's so good.
No.
Yeah.
Any creature. There's
Any
no
creature.
CMC
there's no
restriction.
CMC, sorry. So any
Yeah.
creature to your hand.
Well, now, do you love it, Richard?
No.
Did you just answer your own question?
I mean, okay. So here's why I think the card's good. First, you get 2 good protection colors, white and black. Lots of targeted removal. So one of the more relevant protection colors. And we were just talking about people like Crim filling your graveyard for you with this sort of body in mind. Being able to get a creature back from your graveyard every turn is pretty powerful. It's not quite an Eternal Witness, but I want graveyard recursion in basically all my decks, some amount of it. And this is a really easy way that any deck, regardless of what colors you're in, can have a bit of graveyard recursion.
And
The
just
colors.
a heads up, Richard
the
gave
colors are
C, we
perfect.
gave A's. Sorry.
Yeah, the colors are perfect, right? Pro black white. That's exactly what I want on a sword. And then the graveyard recursion is nice. The 3 life is obviously, whatever. But
Phil probably would have wanted that 3 life.
I mean, yeah, Phil might like that, but other than that, it's just the recursion and the colors alone make it almost like an S.
Okay, so Richard, you have sort of Fire and Ice ranked pretty highly, right? Sort of Fire and Ice. When you hit, you get to draw a card and deal 2 damage. Isn't this very similar? You're getting that same effect essentially, where you're getting to draw a card every time.
Early turn, start drawing cards, which help me make my land drops, and if I get in 3 hits with a sword, I can actually get 3 cards. If you hit me on turn 3 with the Light of Shadow, you've done nothing because you don't have a graveyard.
I gained 3
Right?
life.
You've gained 3 life. Whoop-de-doo, right? And you need to wait until something hits the graveyard for you to start drawing cards. Why don't you just play one of those 3 mana, take 2 cards out of your graveyard, put in your hand, right? It doesn't give that value unless something is there already. So, and sometimes you don't want a creature, right? Sometimes you want something else, right? A generic card is probably better, right? So I don't like this. If I have my opening hand, it's the saddest of sad faces. After you wrath me, I have stuff in the graveyard. I don't have a creature to put it on. I'm so sad again, right? It's just so conditional for 5 mana to get anything going that it's just not worth, right? Because remember, the drop back of equipment is you need a creature, right? And you needed 5 mana, and you needed to equip without getting yourself blown out. And then the payback is get a card from a graveyard, like hope Krim went to town on me with this Sword of Body and Mind and get somewhere. Like it's very questionable.
So
I
like
think people. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Well, I think for all these swords, I think people are undervaluing the protection side. Like giving something +2/+2 is not crazy or anything, but it's good. It's better than nothing. But giving stuff protection from 2 colors, not only is it like, oh yeah, I have protection from, targeted removal. It's much more than that. It's the fact that now your creature can actually get in there for damage. Like I saw in a recent Commander Clash, Richard was going off on how bad Ragavan is, and me when I was editing, and I'm like, no, you're wrong, Richard, because it's like you put a sword on it, and now suddenly Ragavan can get through.
Don't make it us.
You can no. The whole thing is like the protection is actually super relevant. It makes the card a lot better. So yeah, you are getting a creature from your graveyard each time you hit, but you're not just that. It means your creature can hit when it otherwise couldn't, because if your opponent has black and white creatures that are defending, now your creature can actually get through there and get that damage in. And not only that is it's doing 2 extra damage, whereas before you would be doing 0 damage with that creature because it wouldn't be both it.
Which will probably get you through as well, but then give you an actual trigger that does something, right?
It does something. It gets back a creature.
So here's my argument then. Like, if you're playing a deck with enough creatures to support playing swords in your deck, sure, maybe if you play and equip this somehow on turn 3, maybe it's not great, but most of the time you're gonna have a creature in your graveyard. It's pretty rare that someone's not gonna have cast a wrath, removal spells. I don't think the issue of this not having a target is really something I'm concerned about if you're playing a deck that has enough creatures to support a sword anyway. So I see it as draw a card. Sure, maybe in the very early game it's not gonna be great, but
several hits with the sword for it to be. You paid 5 mana for any of these swords, so it goes for all of these swords, right? You got to hit multiple times, right? So you can't wait until turn 6 and then expect to hit 3 times, right? You got to get in early, because the game ends by turn 6, right? You got to get on turn 3 and hit 3 times, and then the game ends
by
right?
turn 6. Come on,
not
our
remember
games.
You're paying 5 mana, right? You have to get a lot of value out of this, right? So that's why you can't put all these conditionals on it. Equipment's already dicey enough as is, right? So,
you've convinced me enough to lower
I haven't
it
seen
to
any of
B,
you play a Light
but
Shadow
there's no way
ever, by the way, for this
What do you
supposed
mean?
A card.
It's in my Cauldra deck. What do you
You
mean?
probably haven't seen me play an equipment in a very long time. That's just not really my play style for the most part.
C's and B's, right?
But that's not because they're bad. It's just not my play. My preferred play. What am I gonna put on my Muldrifter that I'm drawing cards with or whatever? I just don't play that style of deck that much.
I lowered it to a B because I do think Sword and Fire and Ice is better, Feast and Famine is better, and I put those at A's. So I think it's a B, but there's no way I would put it as a C. Not mediocre filler. I would definitely run it, and I do run it.
Okay, what about Sinew and Steel? That's another controversial one.
I like it. Tell us what Sinew and Steel is while I'm looking for my card.
Sinew and Steel is pro black and red, and it deals combat damage to a player, destroy up to 1 planeswalker and up to 1 artifact.
Horrible.
Amazing.
Slightly better than Body in Mind, but not by a whole lot.
Better than Body in Mind?
Better than Light and Shadow.
Wow, dude.
There's very few planeswalkers in Commander, so that mode is essentially just a blank in a big percentage of the games that you play. So all you're really getting is protection and blowing up an artifact, which is nice, but that's not something that excites me or would make me put this in my deck. Like we said, there's 7 swords. There's a lot of options here. There's a lot of competition. This just isn't beating out the other options for me.
I disagree.
Have you found your Light and Shadow, Tomer? Is that what
I have it as a B. Crim C, slightly higher, and then D's from Seth and Richard, which D is for disappointed in you.
Why do you like it? Well, tell me.
Because
on
artifact
this card,
removal's super. Well, first of all, it's in my deck. Here we go. The Cauldron deck. There it is. So
Okay.
proof that I actually run it.
I don't know if being in a Cauldra deck as a sign and equipment is good. Though. It's actually kind of opposite. So.
Oh, wow. All right, you went there. All right, we'll get to Cauldra. But Sinew and Steel, I think artifacts are a very, very typical thing that you want to remove. And this does so very easily. Every single turn, essentially, you get to remove one artifact because, again, protection from black and red means your creature is very likely to get through to somebody. And also, it's not the defending player who you lose artifact or planeswalker. It's any. So you could hit somebody and then blow up somebody else's artifact. You don't have to hit that particular person. So it's really easy to get that trigger through as long as you have creatures on the battlefield. You just equip one of them and you're going to get that trigger. So every single turn, you're basically blowing up a problematic artifact. And if there is a planeswalker, you can literally go artifact and planeswalker. And from personal experience playing the deck, there's never been a situation where there wasn't an artifact that I wanted to blow up. Even as it could be a Sol Ring, it could be a Mana Rock, it could be something much better than that. But there's always something that I want to blow up that's an artifact. So the fact that it's always going to be triggering something and getting some relevant value out of it and so easy to do so is nice. And then the fact that it blows up planeswalkers is extra nice. Like if you're up against a Super Friends deck and you can't even attack the person because, you know, they have like a sphere of safety or whatever nonsense pillow for Super Friends does, then you can just hit somebody else and take it out.
I mean, I feel like what this really does is just like ends up making you like annoying the table because you're blowing up everyone's mana rocks every single turn and making them want to kill you. Like, sure, there's always an artifact, but most of the time, aren't you just like, oh, whose signet am I going to blow up this turn? And then that person's like, I guess I'm attacking Tomer next turn because he blew up my signet for no reason.
That's valid.
This is why Tomer dies, right? Like, you need to use it, but like, you don't run around firing off spot removal on people's mana rocks, right? Like, you want to save it for something important, and all you've done is just anger people. And then you have nothing to defend with because you've attacked your creatures, right? So, yes, you can remove an artifact, but you want to hold your removal for when it matters and not just fire it off like slowly, turn by turn, and put a big target on yourself where everyone sees like, oh, I have an artifact I want, and Tomer's holding a sword of Sinew and Steel. Can't remove it, so I better remove the player, and then they kill him, right? So I think you'd rather just play Vandal Blast or something and, you know, make sure you finish the job if you start it, right? Like, don't nickel and dime people. It's too dangerous.
My rebuttal is, you're right. I mean, this deck has never won. And it plays out that way. But also, I do think it's a valuable card. That's why I didn't put it as like an A or an S. It's still very valuable in equipment. You know what? So, and also, just as a rebuttal, nobody plays Sword and Light and Shadow. Boom, Sword and Light and Shadow. In my,
it's the pretty one.
That
That's even a fancy one,
Cauldra,
too.
though. What?
It's good in Cauldron decks.
Wait, how many more swords? We got, what, 2 swords left to talk about? I think. What about Sword of War and Peace? Have any of you ever played a Sword of War and Peace is protection from red and white. When you hit someone, it deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in their hand, and you gain a life for each card in your hand. So damage and life gain.
Better than Light
I don't think
Shadow.
I've ever
You
seen
gain more
anyone
life.
Better than Light and Shadow.
It's utterly unplayable. If we had to rank all the
it's
D's
bad.
together, you know, it would be in there.
This would be the absolute lowest. I would rather. No, I actually wouldn't. I would still pick this over the mill one because it's not actually sabotaging me.
Yeah, that is correct.
Yeah, that's.
But it's not much higher.
Someday you will all understand what it's like to enjoy the finer things in
Please
life.
mill me, Fred. Please mill me.
Wait, but there's one more. There's one more. We still got Truth and Justice. Pro Blue and White. When you hit someone, you put a +1/+1/+1 counter on a creature you control and proliferate. Is this better than the last one? Sort of War and Peace. I think this is also one that's probably in all of our D tier pile, but like.
Well,
There
I put it
exists
as
a deck
B.
where it's good. Like
a
deck.
Traxa or something.
I put it as B.
Oh God!
Yeah.
You put
Look,
it as B?
it's good in a deck that wants to proliferate. It's absolutely fine. Like if you're in like a Super Friends deck, you make a lot of tokens because a lot of Planeswalkers make tokens. You can run a Sword of Truth and Justice in there. Especially if your commander's a Traxa. Like you put this on a Traxa, you smack somebody with it, and you get to proliferate twice in a single turn cycle, and you gain even more life, and it has like vigilance, I think. So it's like, yeah, that's good.
You are correct. If I was playing a proliferate deck, then I would probably play this card, but I don't think I've seen a proliferate deck in 5 years or something. Like, it's not a very popular archetype. So for me, I think it's still like pretty D-ish just because.
Infect.
Yeah.
What about counter decks? +1/+1 counter decks. Those are incredibly popular in Commander. You wouldn't run into this?
You get a
in there?
single
It's too
counter.
much
Yeah.
Too
for
much.
that. Atraxa, I agree with, right? I think it's like an all-star in that in Planeswalker decks, but I think those decks are extremely narrow, right? So
When you say too
a
much,
solid
is that like a price range thing, or is it too much of a diva, that sort of thing?
you got 5 mana and a successful combat at sorcery speed. Is that worth a proliferate and a counter? Let's say you get 2 hits in with the sword before it breaks even. Is 2 counters and 2 proliferates worth it? Like, I would argue no. So like it's just too expensive for like a generic counters deck or something like that. You have to really abuse it with Planeswalkers or Atraxa.
And even with like Atraxa or a Super Friends deck, you also got to have enough creatures to make it work. Like a lot of Super Friends decks I see are like a handful of creatures and like just all the Planeswalker and Planeswalker support stuff. So even in some Super Friends decks, I don't know if you can support...
Yeah, like Gideon and Soren, I guess.
Yeah.
Vampire.
I don't even know if you can support a sword in a Super Friends deck, or not all Super Friends decks.
Wait, doesn't it do something else though?
It's colorless. It's fine.
You get
Well,
a
you
single
put a counter
+1/+1
on
counter. A single
It's
one.
really
That's
bad.
like...
But then you
That-
have
that
to
one doesn't
proliferate
matter.
that counter, so you get
No.
it's essentially you get +2/+2 counters.
That's like the
I
worst
mean,
MDFC.
I,
The single
I don't
+1/+1
know
counter.
whether it's like a B. I think it's still good in proliferate decks, and so I think it merits a B there. Maybe it's not good enough for +1/+1 counter decks. So it could be a B, it could be a C. But I think it's good in proliferate. I'm gonna keep it as a B.
I'll give it a C.
I'm gonna keep it as a B.
C, I'll go C. C is probably
right.
fine. D might be
There
too
is a
harsh.
use for it.
Just don't play in a
more than
generic deck. Like, don't be like, oh, I got a Planeswalker, or oh, this thing makes a counter. Like, you need to be a very specific deck to make it worth it.
So did we just cover all 7 of the printed swords? I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we got them all. We
can
did
talk
miss sort
about
of
Fire Ice,
Cauldra,
it's
but
getting early to talk about it.
War and Peace is just bad, so yeah.
War and Peace is bad.
what about
All right,
sort of
so-
Cauldra? We forgot that one.
Oh, God.
D,
Are we
D
talking
minus.
Cauldra? Do you want to go there, Seth?
Yeah, let's
You
talk
wanna
Cauldra,
unleash
Tomer.
the Cauldras? I have them. They're all here. They're all
sorry.
here, Seth.
Oh, that's the only good one.
No! All right. we're
Actually,
talking
sorry, that's the only
Cauldra.
decent one. Not
I
good,
have
just
deemed
decent.
this that we are talking Cauldra time. All right. So the OG Cauldra pieces are 3 equipments. the first one, I can't even find it. Where's the first
I don't
one?
even know what they do off by heart.
No,
That is sad.
you didn't put it. You didn't put it in the list.
I mean, they've never actually been assembled.
so
Oh,
blame-
it is. Oh,
don't-
it is there.
don't
It
blame
is there.
Tomer.
4
He's-
mana, equip 4, you gain indestructible. Okay, sword is 4 mana, equip 4.
Whoa, you're selling it short already.
What?
The Shield of Cauldron not just gives the equipped creature indestructible, it also gives Sword of Cauldron, Helm of Cauldron, and Shield of Cauldron itself indestructible.
Okay.
That's a
I'll
big
hand
difference.
Over to Tomer. I don't want to do this injustice.
All right, Shield of Cauldron, the real text here. It's a 4 mana equipment, and it costs 4 to equip. It gives itself and Sword of Cauldron and Shield of Cauldron indestructible, and the equipped creature gets indestructible. So if you do like an austere command, destroy all creatures and artifacts, neither of those get destroyed. No good day, sir. And then the other one is Sword of Cauldron, 4 mana equipment, 4 to equip. A crit creature gets a massive +5/+5, and whenever it deals damage to a creature, not just combat damage but damage, remove that creature from the game, exile it. So if it pings somehow, if you ping with your +5 equipped creature, exiled, gone forever. And then Helm of Cauldra, finally the best of the best. It's a 3 mana equipment, equip 2. Equipped creature gets first strike, trample, and haste, aka all the best stuff. But if you have all 3 pieces of Cauldra, you can pay 1 mana to activate the Helm's crazy ability, and you summon the Avatar Legend Cauldra, which is a 4/4, and you equip all 3 pieces of it. So together with its power, it becomes a first strike, trample, haste, indestructible 9/9 creature that also exiles when it deals damage.
You've just wasted so much mana. And everything that you just
I
said
think we
there.
wasted a lot of time in this podcast.
What do you mean?
We spent so long reading that text all for nothing.
Oh, man.
I
all of
mean-
it is moot.
Look,
All
good-
of these are
good
like
things come to those who wait, and longer text is better.
So all of Cauldra is like there's just strictly better versions of all these cards printed, right? Maybe not Sword of Cauldra. That one's kind of unique, but like Shield of Cauldra is just more expensive dark steel plate unless you're protecting another Cauldra piece. It's like one more mana to cast, 2 more mana to equip. Helm of Cauldra, there's an equipment I didn't even know existed until I just looked this up called Chariot of Victory, which none of us knew was an actual Magic card that is exactly Helm of Cauldra except 1 less mana to equip. And the other problem with Cauldra is it forces you to play all the other bad Cauldra pieces in your same deck. So not only does it make your deck worse by itself, it makes your entire deck worse by making you play 3 bad cards together.
Look,
Okay,
It's a D.
the $1 million question here is: would you play all 3 Cauldra or a Sword of Body and Mind?
All 3 Cauldra.
Cauldra.
all these Cauldra again.
I
doesn't
I
it-
can play
says
Sword
body-
of Body Mind and 2 Planes, which has more effective value to my deck.
If those are my choices, I'm playing Hearthstone.
Wow.
Just
I
know
will
that
say,
Richard
though,
chose the Body and Mind over the Cauldra.
Shield of Cauldra is a legit card. Like, people play that ironically, right?
What?
Like you need more than 1 dark steel plate. You have Hammer of Nizan, you have Shield of Cauldra, and like Tomer said, you can Wrath through and keep the shield. But like, you know, sometimes I build it and I'm like, should I add the other 2 Cauldra pieces because I have all my tutors and everything? And the answer is always no, right? The answer is like, you get what? You get a 4/4 for all this effort? Like, what is the point, right? So it's not even like infect or anything. It doesn't like kill anyone, right? Like, you still have to hit them like 5 times after you've done this, right? So
But you
Look.
get like a 4/4 avatar or something, right?
If you expect me to defend Cauldra as like a top S rank thing, you'll be disappointed because our rating for it: Helm of Cauldra, D's all around except for me, C. Sword of Cauldra, D's all around except for me, C. But Richard, he's with me here, a C, and for me and Richard, and a D for the Shield of Cauldra for everybody else. So yes, I will admit. The
This is all you need.
Cauldras aren't good. They're not good. All right. You wanted to hear that? That's you heard it from the source. I've been trying to win with Cauldra for over 5 years on Commander. Over 5 years on Commander. I have a Cauldra deck. I can tell you on one hand how many times I've actually won with Cauldra. Can you guess? Can you guess how many times I won
0.
with Cauldra?
Can you tell me on 0 hands?
Yeah.
No, I actually won a single time, and I managed to capture it on stream, so I turned it into an abridged gameplay. Link popping up on the card. Boom. So yes, I've done it one time out of over 50 games, at least 50 games. So no, are these cards good? No, but they're not like unplayable because they do have cool effects. They're just way overcosted, right? Like the Shield of Cauldra is a good effect, but its Dark Steel Plate costs 1 less to cast and 2 less to equip, which is bananas in comparison, right? And Dark Steel Plate is not even like super
Dark
highly
Steel
rated.
Plate is bananas in 2022.
Yeah. So it's not great. And,
That
and
card
but, like,
is bananas.
I think they're neat. All right. I think they're neat. That's why I give them a nice C because
about
I think
this?
they're still.
Just play this. It's sort of
No.
Body and Mind.
I didn't even buy that one. I left it out.
Wow, just leaving money on the table.
All right.
I do agree that Cauldra is a cool design. I'll give you that, Tomer.
It is
It's
cool. And you
not
can
good, but
combo win with it.
I like the quest aspect of it. So
Yes.
it still shocks me that Homer hasn't won more often with this thing. Just like somehow you just survived and you have like 30 lands, you
There's-
just slap them all together and like kill someone.
So
It's because
there's a
Tomer
hidden
won with the
disadvantage.
swords.
There's actually a hidden disadvantage to the equipment beyond just the card text. And I call it the Planeswalker problem, where if anybody sees you having one of these pieces on the battlefield, they will go out of their way to exile your Cauldra pieces to stop you. It's like you know when you play Planeswalker and it's not the
about the
biggest
God
threat at
team.
the table. It's like a bad Planeswalker, but everybody at the table will still punch it in the face, even if it has no ultimate, even if it was 0 text, even if it was like Tybalt. You could play Tybalt on the battlefield and you could never even ultimate it ever, and people will still knock it out. Same thing with Cauldra. You play a Cauldra piece, people will exile it. It'll go out of their way. They will
How
make
mad would you
bad
be if
decisions.
Crim hit you with the body in mind and milled a Cauldra piece.
All 3 of them.
That would be good because I have recursion for my Cauldra, obviously. I'm running Cauldra. Of course I'm going to have recursion for a Richard. All right? So yes, we've agreed Cauldron's not that good, but it's still very funny. We'll move on. We'll move on to a card that actually a lot of people think is one of the best cards in the format. Even as far as last year, the professor made a video dedicated to this card being like super, super awesome. It's been a staple of Boros decks forever, but we're not so high on it. So Seth, tell us a little about Sunforger.
Ooh, so Sunforger, 3 mana, 3 to equip. It gives the equip creature +4/+0, and then you can pay a red and a white and unattach it. And you get to search your library for a red or white instant card with converted mana cost 4 or less and cast it without paying its mana cost. So essentially a way you can tutor up instants and sorceries from your library for a ridiculous amount of mana. It's really, really like 3 to cast, 3 to equip, 2 to unattach. So it's even after on the battlefield, it's 5 mana to get a 4 mana spell out of your library. Rating wise, Richard's got a C. Everyone else has a B. Sunforger is a card that I think is just a little bit overrated. I think this is another one of those cards that it seems like a lot of people just like jam in their random Boros decks and just play it for value. Like, oh, I got some, Path to Exiles in my deck or whatever. Like, that'll be cool. I'll tutor them up. It's just way too expensive for that. I think you got to have specific synergies, free equip synergies, things like that, for me to really consider putting Sunforger in my deck. Even if I got a bunch of spells that can potentially tutor up, it's just way, way too expensive and way, way too slow in 2022. But what do you guys think?
I think the card's still pretty decent. I mean, just the colors of Boros and being able to unequip the item and then getting any spell is big. I think that's very, very big. I mean, why not, right? Like that utility is absurd. I think like if I see a Sunforger, I have to kill this thing. Is it the best equipment I've ever seen? No, but does it deserve the title that it has? Probably. I mean, I don't think I've ever let a Sunforger stick around and then have that work out for me.
I'm definitely in Crim's shoes. I've seen a lot of games where Sunforger still takes over the game, even in recent times. Because what happens when someone plays a Sunforger and equips it? Like, you go to try and remove it at that point when Sunforger is already equipped. They'll deflecting swat you. They'll unequip it, search up deflecting swat, or you try to wipe the board. They'll hit you with Teferi's Protection. There's Flawless Maneuver if you're trying to wipe creatures. Boros Charm, again, also protection for all of your stuff. All stuff gets indestructible. You play a big threat, they'll have Swords of Plowshare. So the fact that it's basically a Swiss Army knife for Boros decks makes it really appealing. And once it gets going, it will warp the game. It will take over the game. The only problem, as Seth mentioned, is it costs 5 mana each time you're doing it, so it's very slow. It gets so much better if you have a way to equip for free, which is Arden or Pure Steel Paladin. I think those are the only 2 ways that I know off the top of my head that you can repeatedly just equip and re-equip for free. Outside of that, though, like in slower metas, this is always going to be super great, but in faster metas, like just paying 3 mana, down payment of 3 mana, then 5 to equip it and unequip it, and the fact that you're now going to be the archenemy at the table until it gets removed, it has gotten worse over time, I think.
Card's super overrated. Are you guys
Richard
hearing
hates
yourself?
it.
7 mana? Okay, before you to get your first trigger. So here's the thing. There is nothing good to get. They're all reactive, right? They're all either removal or indestructible. There's no Boros instant to just randomly draw cards, right? So you run into the Sword of Sinew and Steel problem, where if you want to get value, you gotta just randomly start snapping off Swords to Plowshares, like for no reason, right? Rather than holding it. Like if there was a 4 mana draw 3 instant in Boros, then I could see some actual point to this. But like, just remember, 7 mana and a creature before you get some value. And then you got to fill your deck with all these random toolbox instants for no reason. And you know how I feel about spot removal. Now you got to run a lot of it because
They're amazing,
Forger, right?
But you love like Boros Charm and stuff.
Like
right?
One. Are you going to run Sunforger with like 1 Path to Exile, 1 Boros Charm, right? Like
It's birthing
It's
time.
so
How many
expensive.
targets do you need for it, though? I think like 5. And
This
you're
is a
good.
relic of the past where you were desperate and you would pay 8 mana to draw a card in Boros, right? But that time is long gone. We can now draw lots of cards in Boros.
Yeah,
Like,
Secret
even if you hate
Rendezvous.
Secret
Duh.
Rendezvous.
But it's not card draw.
Wheel of
It's a
Misfortune.
tutor. It's a tutor that you cast immediately.
I mean,
But the
even
tutor's
when
always removal or
No,
protection.
it's not
Like,
always removal though. It's protection.
I mean, even with you
that's the only
describing the
choice.
best, even when you're describing the best case scenario, Tomer, like what comes to mind for me is like, please do that. Like, I cast a lightning bolt on your thing or a path on your thing, and you're gonna spend 5 mana to get a Boros charm to like keep your thing alive. That seems like a really good trade for me. Like, sure, maybe your thing didn't die, but I'm kind of just time walking you. You're spending 5 mana. You're gonna do that every single turn, and then get a deflecting slot and like do that again. Like, is it progressing the game enough for it to really be good, or are you just like spending your entire game keeping your Sunforger alive to keep your Sunforger alive to keep your Sunforger alive? Like,
Well, okay, I have a question for you. We're playing Commander Clash. Next episode of Commander Clash, I'm playing a Boros deck, and I put down a Sunforger. How do you think the rest of the table is going to react? I'm willing to bet the rest of the table will be terrified and be scrambling to find answers for the Sunforger.
But here's the thing, Tomer. You will die. There's a difference, right? If you played something that everyone was terrified of and you could fight through it, that's worth, right? But you will play a Sunforger, snap off 1 path to exile, and then die a miserable death. Like, it's not strong enough to warrant the hate it takes, right?
You can
That's
also
the
get...
difference.
But what about you get like an Akroma's Will or something, and you just Alpha Strike because you got your Sunforger?
And then now they'll hit you like right afterwards. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's scary, but it can't. When it's like playing half a combo piece, like theoretically scary, but you didn't finish the job, so you just die.
But none of these equipments just finish the job. All of them are scary because they're all incremental value engines.
I think people are unnecessarily
when it
scared of it, like morph style, because it's the fear of the unknown. Like, I don't know what you got in your deck, so I'm just like super afraid of the unknown. But when you actually
You
think
know what
through
I've
the
got in my
possibilities,
deck.
but if you think through the possibilities of what they're getting, it's much less scary than it actually looks, I think. But I'm sorry, Grim, go ahead.
When you put in the context of equipment, I think it is very good. There's obviously better things to be doing, but if you're an equipment deck, you want to be doing this, right? This is one of the better equipments you could be getting.
And we should make
Richard,
it
would you
clear,
not
like,
run it in an equipment deck? Like, you have Pure Steel Paladin and stuff. You wouldn't?
No, because
Even in your, like, Arden
you gotta
Rogue
fill your
Rack?
deck with useless instance. So I would actually play it in like a Spellslinger, right? Like a the Boros guy, the Minotaur dude. You know what I'm talking about?
Okay.
The guy that has, like,
Fire
Fire
Song.
Song and Sunspeaker.
Yeah. Like where you're naturally running like a ton of instants for some reason, right? But like I would not put this because I have to dilute my equipment with like instants, and why would I do that, right? I would just play more equipment, right? I'm not desperate for card. I have Secret Rendezvous. I'm
This is like the
3
first
mana
card-
draw 3 as opposed to 7 mana
Secret
draw 1.
Rendezvous. Is that
This is
what?
like
Okay. All right.
This is like the 5th equipment that I add into any Boros equipment deck.
That takes
I mean-
like 7
Okay.
deck slots though, Tomer. You gotta then start adding all the instants in, right?
And we should make it clear, this has been a pretty harsh conversation, but we do mostly have it rated as B. So I don't think most of us are arguing that this is like an unplayable card. Richard has it as a C, which is average. The rest of us have it as Bs, which is good in specific decks. So it's not like we're all trying to say like Sunforger is horrible. But again, if you go back to EDH Rec, this is the 4th most played equipment. Greaves, Boots, Skullclamp, Sunforger.
This is the
That seems
equipment
a
that,
little
like,
high.
if you're in
That seems a little
Boros, people
high.
just put it in there as an auto include, and I think the entire table can agree that we wouldn't do that. Like,
Yeah.
I think me, Seth, and Krim are like, we'll put it in equipment decks because it gets
Yeah,
really good.
Yeah, if you can free equip it and you have those shenanigans, then I like it a lot. But just don't
And
just
Richard's
throw
just
it in
like, no.
Boros because you're like, oh, I got a few spells in my deck. Like, no, don't do that.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Fair. We consider it overrated, but still good in certain situations. Next up, what do we got? Krim, what do you want to talk about?
So up next we've got. Let me see here. Pull up the tier. Okay. So, then we have the Explorer Scope, which why is this on here? Like,
Homer really likes it.
Get the
Why
Oracle
is
on
this-
one.
No, like, okay, all right. 1 mana, whenever a equipped creature attacks, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it on the battlefield tapped. Equip 1.
swear
Why
it's
is this on here?
I swear it's good.
So, Tomer,
So then-
I'm gonna like, is Tomer? Delbert, why don't you read this one? Because clearly you
All right.
like this card. I think this card is caca. Doo-doo water. I would not play this anywhere near my deck.
All right.
It's mana
is
crap.
magnificent.
Yeah, this
Tomer
is
gave
mana
it a
crap.
B, Seth and Krim
Yeah.
D's. I gave it a C.
This is a magnificent card that was printed as a common, if you believe it or not.
I
this
do
powerhouse.
believe it. Yeah, I do believe it.
It's a 1 mana equipment, only 1 to equip. So 2 mana total investment to get it onto your first creature. Whenever equipped creature attacks, you look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped. It doesn't have to be a basic land. It could be any land on top of your library. Put it into play, boom, tapped. My argument on why I think this card is good is it literally has to trigger a single time where it becomes a colorless rampant growth plus because it can hit any type of land, not just a basic land. Rampant growth, 2 mana, you get 1 basic into play. Explorer Scope, 2 mana. As soon as you flip 1 land and put it into play, it is now a rampant growth. Anything beyond that, after you attack more than once, the value can start going insane. If you get 2 lands off this, it's crazy good. The fact that it's so low curve is super good. Yes. Okay. So the blind flip ratio, I don't know. You have like 99 cards. You have like 36 lands. What are the odds that you're gonna flip it at any given time? Probably low. What are the odds that you flip it in two turns? Probably pretty decent. But you need multiple turns. However, there's a lot of decks that you have top deck manipulation for. As long as you can start seeing the top card of your library, like you have an Augur of Autumn, you have whatever thing you have to check the top card of your library, a future sight type effect. It gets really, really good in those decks. In fact, they printed a Bant equipment commander specifically for that people don't even remember because, 2021 is a blur. It was like Gallia of the something, where you get to look at the top card of your library, and it's a Bant equipment, and it's all about looking at the top card of your library and cheating auras and equipment off the top of your library into play. So it's basically like a future sight for auras and equipment. So you can remove an equipment from the top of your library, see that land, and then immediately attack. And there's brainstorm and stuff like that make it even more and more good. So in any deck that has top deck manipulation, Explorer Scope is a half price Sword of the Animus that could also hit non-basics. And I think that is really sweet. It's really cool. All right. It's 1 mana investment. You can put it on 1 turn run.
I mean, my question would be is it really worth it, even though it's a little bit cheaper, over playing something that guarantees you're going to get a land, like Sword of the Animist or a Sword of Hearth and Home that we were talking about? Do you really want a 33% chance of getting a land when you could just play a very slightly more expensive equipment and get a bunch of other upsides, like pumping your creatures, and know you're going to get a land?
This doesn't even do anything to the creature, right? It's just literally, if it attacks, you get a land.
You don't need to hit, though. It just attacks.
You don't need to hit.
Right. If it attacks,
block it.
you get a land, maybe.
So I'm pretty torn on this. I'm between it's the greatest card ever, like Tomer, or it's complete utter trash, and I'm not sure, which is why I wanted to hear what Tomer had to say.
Well, I put it as a B. I didn't say it's the greatest card ever. All right, I put it as a B.
B is you're sticking it in generic.
B is it's
decks,
very
right?
good in specific archetypes, but not the majority of archetypes. B is in the top deck manipulation decks. Slam dunk.
But I feel in a top deck,
the C to me, but
What?
not many non-blue decks can manipulate the top of their deck easily.
and if they did, they don't want to just they don't want this, right? I feel this feels like a wasted card slot.
But you are ramping, and you can ramp non-basics, which, as we go back to our conversation, when you run out of basics, because you don't have that many basics in your deck, you can actually ramp with it. The problem is, you need to get in early with this, and what are you getting in early with? It's very hard. Your worst case scenario, if it's a rampant growth on turn 5, is terrible, right? You don't play
Ragavan.
You need it on turn 2, but you can't get this on turn 2, right? So I don't know.
You just slap it on something with evasion. You don't. If it's a later game, then you should have some sort of evasive creatures that can get in there.
I
Perhaps
consider
with a
equipment
sword.
good if it does something for 2 turns. So I get 2 attacks. I get to ramp 1 card. But it's turn 4 or 5 at this point. Was I happy casting?
You were just talking about how much Hearth and Home, the best thing in the game is ramping, blah, blah, blah.
But Hearth and Home does a lot more than
that.
This.
Guarantees it.
It actually
but
ramps
it's
you.
5
yes.
mana to get your first investment out of it. This is 2 mana.
I don't know. I think C still. I don't know. I want to play with this more. I think it has potential. I think it
Like
is.
you put
I
this,
think it's
put this
severely
on your
underrated.
cartographer's hawk. Boom. So
But then
so
you,
much value.
doesn't that
Rammed
nullify
twice.
your next cartographer's hawk?
Yeah, but
attack?
that's the cartographer's hawk life, baby. Like as soon as cartographer's hawk turns off, it's even better because then you don't have to spend that mana on recasting it and equipping it again.
The other thing I don't like about
Liars,
this is
an upgrade.
I think this gets worse in the world of MDFCs too. Like I know I play a lot less actual lands than I did a year ago. And if you're playing, 6 or 8 MDFCs and only like 30-ish real lands, you're kind of shifting the math meaningfully away from randomly spinning into your lands with this as well. So that's something else to keep in mind.
I don't think people run 8+ MDFCs
I do.
like you, Seth. I know.
Oh, okay.
I run like,
All right,
I run like 5.
Maybe
They
that's
run
just-
like 2.
Maybe that's they're
Like, I
wrong.
think if
They're
you-
I don't
wrong.
know.
You play
There's like
this.
4. There's like
Maybe
4
it is a
MDFCs.
I'm keeping it as a B. Top deck manipulation decks. Let's go. Daxos. Let's go. All right. What spice do we have left? Okay. All right. Let's talk about a card we can all agree is pretty darn sweet. Not quite Greaves level of ubiquitous, but Shadowsphere. We were talking before the podcast started that Shadowsphere it's pretty good. I don't know what we rated it as. What did we rate it as? Did we rate it?
I
we did.
rated
We
it
have,
as-
The A's for the rest of you.
yeah.
I think this is the closest.
It's near
thing to
number
like an
9
S.
on the list, near the top.
Oh, okay. So Shadowsphere, it's a 1 mana equipment, 1 mana legendary equipment, equip 2. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has trample and lifelink, so 2 nice keywords and a little boost. And it has an activated ability, permanent to your opponent's control, lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. But the nice caveat here is that you can activate this ability without actually equipping a creature with it. So this can just be you pay 1 mana, you put this thing on the battlefield, and then whenever you need to remove hexproof and indestructible from your opponent's side of the battlefield, you just do that. It doesn't have to have a creature attached to it. So it's even more reliable than most equipment. But then when you equip it onto something, just 2 mana, you equip something onto it, +1/+1, trample, and lifelink. Seth, Krim, and I all gave it A's. Richard is a little bit more conservative. He gives it a B.
This card's insane. This might
yeah.
be my number 1 non-Greaves boots equipment in the entire format. I actually think this is, I don't believe any equipment can be an S tier, but this is about as close as you can get to an S tier. And as we were doing this, I realized there's a bunch of popular equipment that are just way worse versions of this. We had Behemoth Sledge on our list, which essentially is the same thing, except you can't do the hexproof shenanigans, and it's 3 mana to cast and 3 to equip, and all you get is 1 more +1/+1 on your creature. This is just invalidated Loxodon Warhammers, so many past equipment. I think you can just play this in every deck. I really am a firm believer that every deck needs some amount of life gain, and this can be your incidental life gain effect. And if you're playing a Crim deck, I'm sure that getting rid of hexproof and getting rid of indestructibility is actually a pretty big thing, I would assume, right, Crim?
Yep, that's why I love this card. I when this card was spoiled, right? I knew I bought tons of this, so I'm very happy I have a ton of these cards because I thought this was just an auto include in every commander deck. With the amount of things like Heroic Intervention and me just wanting to stomp out all the Veil of Summer players and all that stuff, right? So my hate for hexproof has made me really appreciate this card and indestructible. So
No Swift boots are ruining your day.
Yep. This card is just good. Just like Seth said, you can just leave it on the field. And on top of that, with more decks starting to play Urza Saga in their decks, this is something you can get up with Urza Saga.
Yep.
Having
So
an
good.
answer to Boros Charm and stuff is also real nice. So
Guys
I
really
like it.
like this.
So Richard, you just don't
you're
like it
not
as
even
much.
equipping it. You're just using it.
I don't
for
even
its
have to.
active?
I think
Well,
of all
Chris
the
doesn't believe
equipment.
in
That's
creatures,
messed
so
up.
obviously.
You need big, gross green creatures to slap this on them, or else you're not putting it in your deck.
What are you
so
talking
the reason
about?
you play Loxodon Warhammer is because you're playing creatures that will have double strike and whatnot, where that pumping is relevant, right? So that's why you would play stuff like that, right? This the active is available on the land, the losing hexproof part if you want. The indestructible part, I don't know, using this to combo with your spot removal seems super weak, especially if you have no purpose of this in your deck, right? Just play Merciless Eviction or something to do effectively the same thing. So I think
But
this goes.
but Merciless Eviction is 6 mana.
Yeah, but this is a 2-card combo, right? You
This-
need
this
the
is
Shadowsphere and the spot removal, right?
No, this is just it exists, and I can turn it off. Like example, if Seth has a removal spell, hey, I can help you remove that creature and I'll
Get
pay
it
the
on
1,
land,
right?
though. You can just play the.
But the land doesn't remove indestructible.
I don't know. I think that's a
Lots
like you need
of-
to play big green creatures for this. You can't play it in like Grixis control. I mean, I know
gets-
Crim will, but it seems weird to me, right?
Well,
It's
It's
inefficient.
better if you can utilize that lifelink. Like you
Yeah.
really want to utilize a trample and lifelink, but like I don't know, you equip it to like a 3/3 or whatever. You get 4 life gain action each turn, and you still have its utility. Like
Yeah.
I mean,
like
that's-
it.
it's medium.
All my
though.
decks still have a creature, right? Because the creature is the commander, so there will be something I can equip it to. And as I had mentioned, it's a Urza Saga's target. So
It just does so much for so little. Like,
Yeah.
it really does. Like, it's such a low mana cost, and it does so many different things. And a lot of them are, like, at least somewhat relevant in all games. I don't think you gotta have big green creatures to make it good, but I also am not quite in Crim mode where I would just, like, play this in a creature-free deck just as, like, a spell to get rid of hexproof and indestructible. But I think if you can gain a little bit of life with it, even that is worth it with the additional upsides.
all right, so Richard has historically been one of the hardest, most conservative people in terms of rating on the equipments. But coming up next, we have a card that he actually gave an S. He only gave 3 S's. He actually gave more S's than everybody at the table. But on average, he rates lower than in the Moses. But this is a 3rd S. Richard, tell us about this coveted 3rd S.
So
that you gave.
ironically, I play the most equipment here, by the way. Right? So
I literally
actually
have a
play
Cauldra
equipment in
deck.
decks
What do you
that Have
mean?
no business playing equipment, by the way. But the one equipment that deserves to be in every deck, and I'm actually dead serious about this, is Dowsing Dagger. And the true definition of S is you will warp your deck around it to make this work. I will stuff more creatures in my deck to get a Dowsing Dagger to flip, right? And so Dowsing Dagger, if for some reason you don't know what the greatest card in all of Magic does, is a 2-mana equipment. When it enters the battlefield, you give a player 2/0/2 defender plants. Equipped creature gets +2/+1. When the equipped creature deals combat damage, you flip it, and it becomes a land that taps for 3 mana of any color, and equip is 2. So I believe you should play more creatures just to get Dowsing Dagger to work if you don't have enough creatures, right? If you have a commander, CMC 3 or less, this should be auto-include. If you have a commander with evasion, this should be auto-include. You should play Mana Dorks, Cartographer's Hawk, whatever you need to ensure that you can equip this dagger and hit someone, right? That is far better than a Signet that will get Wrath away, right? Like, your Dork can die in the Wrath, but he flipped the Dowsing Dagger, he did his job, good enough, right? So I will warp my deck just to make this dagger work. I will put Stoneforge Mystic to fetch it up. I will, play...
I've never
literally
seen you
one
have to
drops.
actually tutor it. So I don't.
Yeah, you
just
always
always
just
have
have
it.
it
You'll
anyway.
just have it in your starting hand.
If
How
you
do
play
you
it
do
every
that?
No wonder why
turn,
it's
you
so
will
good.
eventually draw it,
Yeah.
right?
Maybe
it's
if I
good
could
on the
have
late
it turn 2
turns.
guaranteed every single time, I'd run it more often.
It's perfect late game, right?
Is it?
I mean, 3 extra mana is always helpful. I mean, you have sold me on this card. If you had asked me about this card before you played it so many times over the last couple of years, it probably would have been like a C or something, and I wouldn't have really thought through. I would have been like, oh, it's great if you're trying to like give your opponents tokens and then kill them for value or something, which it is, but you have totally sold me on this being an A. Like, I'm not as high on it as you to the like warp my deck, add creatures to my deck to make my Dowsing Dagger flip, but if I got a reasonable enough number of creatures, I think this is like it's just an auto include because the backside in 3 extra mana is so valuable, and you've proved that like time and time and time again on Commander Clash.
Like,
You've
the best
definitely
thing
gotten
upsets
me to
everyone.
like increase my
Rigged it.
rating on this. It is a B as opposed to me playing it like as like a C.
Like
And-
if it
and Crim
flips,
can't
it
even
upsets
flip it 'cause he doesn't
everyone,
believe
and
in
they can't deal
creatures.
with it unless they have a script mine. And if they try to deal with it, you have just as much mana as it's like you gain the 1 mana per player, right? So you have the mana to fight back against the table at the same time, right? So, and then most people just ignore it, right? They're like, oh, I can't script mine it, move on.
I also like how well it plays with like Vesuva and Thespian Stage. Like
Yep.
usually if you have Dowsing Dagger in your deck, I highly recommend. If you're running Dagger, run Thespian Stage and Vesuva, just because they basically net you 2 extra mana on your land drop for a turn. Thespian Stage copies it on the flip side, Vesuva copies it on its flip side.
And it's like built for Commander, like because you can choose a player to give the plants to that already has blockers or whatever. So in 1v1 games, it's actually super hard to flip, but in a Commander game, it's actually pretty easy to flip if you try a little bit.
Yeah, I want to put it S, but like it's very good. If I have creatures that have evasion, I will put it in, and it's one of the highest rated equipment that I have. And I have it in my Cauldra deck. Yay! Yay! It's a special promo version. So much glare.
But Tomer,
I don't even have a promo Dowsing Dagger. Wow.
Wow.
but Tomer,
You're not a fake fan.
There's one other equipment on our list that I just have to know if it's in your Cauldra deck, because I feel like this was like some infamous moment with this in the past on Commander Clash.
Do you want that?
That card's World Slayer. World Slayer. World Slayer. If you don't know what the World Slayer does, it's a 5 mana. Or wait, I'm sorry. It's 5 mana to cast and 5 mana to equip. But when the equipped creature deals combat damage, you destroy all permanents other than World Slayer. We all kind of hate this card. I think we literally all gave it Ds, except for you, Tomer, who gave it a rather robust B. Sell us on this World Slayer. Why is World Slayer good? And is it in
we've
Cauldra?
all seen and we've all respected the Armageddon, right? We all understand that Armageddon can close out games when properly utilized. World Slayer is the next level of Armageddon. Not only does it destroy all lands, it destroys everything but World Slayer. So picture this, if you will. You got a World Slayer on the battlefield. You have a single indestructible creature. Just any indestructible creature will do. You put the World Slayer on the indestructible creature. You swing in. You deal combat damage. And then boom, you won the game. You have an indestructible creature, a World Slayer. Your opponents have 0 permanents on the battlefield. What are they going to do? The best thing they can possibly do is go like planes, swords to plowshares, go. And then that's like the worst case scenario, but 9 times out of time, not even 9 times out of time, like 99.99% of the time, they're not going to go planes, swords to plowshares. The game is over. No, once you actually connected with it and you have at least one creature on the battlefield, you won the game. So this card is like a staple in, for example, Zergo Helm Smasher. That's the one where like it saw the most play, where Zergo is indestructible on your turn. It attacks as a 7/2. You put this on there, you go bam, and somebody dies. But there's a lot of indestructible creatures now, and there's a lot of cheap ways of making your stuff indestructible. Like if you can World Slayer and in response Boros Charm to the trigger, or Teferi's Protection to the trigger, or Flawless Maneuver to the trigger, you get what I'm saying. It's really easy to set up a situation where you win the game, and also it's so boss. It's so cool. You slayed the world. You slayed the world, all right?
It was in middle school when I saw this card, and I fanboyed over it. It was like such a cool looking card.
You can't be mad, all right? I've never heard somebody get salty at the fact that I won the game with a World Slayer.
You destroyed the world with a sword. Like you just stabbed the earth and destroyed it.
It's just like a lone sword is stuck in the earth. And you know what happened to the earth, or the thing in the sky? It got a world slayed. This is the second coming. Anyway.
So I had this as a pretty hard D, but
did I sell you on it?
Yeah, I think you sold me up to a C.
Must deal combat damage.
I think you sold me on it being a C. Like D is like don't even ever play it. But I think there are situations where you can play a World Slayer.
I'll take
Not many, but there's a few.
All right, rounding out the list is one final card that we all agree is at least playable. That's our criteria here that we can agree on. It's playable. Krim, tell us about Skull Clamp.
All right, so Skull Clamp, if you don't know what it does, it's a 1 mana, equipped creature gets +1/-1. When this equipped creature dies or is put into a graveyard, draw 2 cards, and it costs 1 to equip. This is great. I think this is just something you can equip onto a creature that even... It's not ideal, right? Like that I just equip this to like a 3/3 to make it like, a 4/2. But it's nice to just have something to where if a creature dies, you get to net some cards out of it. But it's at its best when you have like a token deck or an X1 loaded deck, an Aristocrats deck, where you can get the benefit of like having your creatures die and then getting something from it. And then on top of that, drawing 2 cards.
Yeah. So I put it as an A. Richard, Seth, and Krim put it as B's. I think I put it as an A because literally, if I have any deck that has like 15 or more creatures, if I put Skull Clamp into that deck, I think the deck gets better. I don't think there's any exceptions to that. Like if I have like a decent amount of creatures to equip it, I don't need to sacrifice it. I don't need to be a token deck. I don't need to worry about its toughness. I just clamp. You know, it's 1 mana to cast, 1 mana to equip. So it's 2 mana, and then the first time a creature that is equipped dies, you get 2 cards. That's already like, you know, a Sign in Blood or whatever. Once you do that a second time, then you're in Value Town. And it's so easy to do it. So I don't know. I think it's a solid A. And it gets better, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, I really only play it if I can kill my stuff. Like, if I'm sacrificing, if they're X1s. I don't usually play it in just a deck with a bunch of big creatures, trusting that they're going to die. I mean, it is pretty convincing that, like, if you draw even 2 cards with this, that's not bad for 2 mana. And if you draw 4 cards, that's, like, insane for 2 mana. So maybe I'm underrating it slightly and should be playing it more often. Because you don't need to trigger it that many times. Like, obviously, the games where it's super exciting is when you, like, have a bunch of tokens and you, like, equip, and all of a sudden you went from, like, 1 card in hand to 7 cards in hand and you're feeling really good about your Skull Clamp. But even if you just draw a few cards over the course of the game, that's still a reasonable amount of value.
This one I'm torn on. So I wanted to ask you guys, would you play this without explicit synergy, so kill your own stuff? And Tomer says yes.
I haven't been, but Tomer might be winning me over a little.
I agree with that. Like
I play
this
with
to me, this is like a
synergies.
Sunforger, where it's a holdover from like the desperation times. Like you played mono white, you had nothing to do, so you clamp it onto Sun Titan, and then you hope someone kills Sun Titan, right? Like
Sunforger costs a lot of mana. This is you've invested 2 mana in a card to hope to draw 2 cards. If you have 0 synergies and you can't kill your own creatures, 2 mana.
I feel like I still want to do that. I feel like in 2022, maybe in red, but all other colors can draw cards, so we don't need to Skull Clamp big creatures and hope for the best. Like we need a Skull Clamp actual small.
You just skipped over white. I like it.
White can draw cards.
Red can't draw cards? I never heard anybody say red can't draw cards. I don't think red can
draw cards, but that's another podcast.
Ooh.
It exiles top of your deck.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. I wonder what the viewers think. Viewers, is this card overrated? Should we play this if we can't sacrifice or have X1s? That one I'm not sure on.
So we all agree it's at least a B. It's good in decks that can abuse its ability, but is it even better than that? I think that's an interesting question. I could be swayed.
This thing was like a true nightmare in Standard.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And banned in most other 60-card formats.
It was like miserable.
maybe 22 Magic. It's lost some luster, but I don't know.
Although it was banned because of Ravager, so it was in a deck that could sacrifice stuff. Like that was like the synergy. So,
it was loaded with things that could just die from it, right? And then trigger the modular, like move things around easily without Ravager too.
I'm right between B and A. You could sway me either way too. I don't think you can be an S, but it's somewhere between B and A for me.
It's still a B for me.
All right. Well, we covered basically all the really interesting stuff. As usual, we're going to keep our full list. We rated like a ton of equipment, so we didn't even mention here. But these were the ones that we picked out. We're like, we can have the most interesting conversations in about the span of an hour and a half. So if you are interested, we'll have links to that along with the podcast wherever you're listening to it, or / if you're watching on it or what have you. So I hope you enjoyed our take on equipment. As always, we come in with different perspectives, different play styles, how we view the game. We just try to make sure that our philosophy and our perspective are consistent with our grading. That's our number one concern. So hopefully we did a good job on that. Hopefully it was entertaining. Maybe you learned something. And also, if you have a different take and you want to teach us something, leave a comment. Reach us at Twitter. You can tweet us at #ClashMail to give us your thoughts directly. We always read those as well. And that's it, everybody. If you like this show, by the way, you can always like and subscribe, buy our merch, mtggoldfishmerch.com. The thing is popping up now, all that good stuff. And until next time, friends, see ya.